Welcome everyone to the Friday edition of the Five Starr Wrestling Report review series. This is the Friday show where every week I cover NWA Power, AEW Dynamite, and NXT TV. Got a lot to get into this week, so I'm not going to waste too much time here. Before I go over the shows, make sure that you subscribe if you have not done so already, and make sure you give this video a rating and a comment or two if you don't mind. It is week 4 of the Wednesday Night Wars, and we will get to that in a little bit, but before that, I've got NWA Power to talk about, as well as the Bound for Glory show to briefly recap. I did see the BFG show in its entirety, which I was sort of going back and forth on, but I heard some things on the show that were worth checking out, so I decided to just watch the whole thing, with one notable exception. And I'll give you my very brief analysis of what I saw there. As far as Bound for Glory goes, I thought the gauntlet opener was very long and phony looking at times. I will never be an advocate of intergender wrestling, and for all of the reasons that I have already explained multiple times during these reports, I will not elaborate on it for the sake of time. Eddie Edwards won. Not much else to really say about it. Kylie Ray made her Impact Wrestling debut here, which got a pretty good reaction from the crowd. Of course, she didn't really do a whole lot here, and I don't really think that this is the best showcase for her, but was what it was. The women's title match with Taya Valkyrie and Tenille Dashwood was just kind of there. I still think Tenille is overrated, and I never understood what people saw from her in WWE. The three-way tag title match was a lot of fun. Everyone got spotlighted well. The Ethan Page military press to Rich Swann off the top rope was awesome. Lots of cool double teams and dives. Crowd was really into it for the most part. Everyone was talking about the RVD heel turn, which was a pretty cool swerve, I thought. I mean, I know a lot of people think it's silly to have people try and boo RVD in 2019, but, you know, I've been sour on RVD since his TNA run, and he's always acted like a cocky, arrogant prick anyway, and whereas with Matt Riddle, there's sort of a charming appeal to it. With RVD, it always just came across as really demeaning to me. So it seems logical that they would try something like this. I mean, in 2019, it seems a bit odd, you know, to have RVD have a heel run. Seems about 15 years past the expiration date, but, well, it's Impact. It's not like anyone is really watching the show anyway. Michael Elgin and Marufuji was a fun Japanese-style match that nobody cared about. And it sucks because they actually had a hell of a match. It just didn't garner a reaction from anyone. The intergender X Division ladder match I skipped. Moose and Ken Shamrock sucked. It's the most polite way that I could put it. And Brian Cage, Sami Callihan was a car wreck-style no DQ main event. Brutal match, lots of hardcore style elements to it. Not my flavor of matches, but it worked for what they were going for. I'm a big fan of Brian Cage, and I always was kind of surprised that WWE never really showed any interest in him. So it's good to see him having a world title run on Impact and kind of being treated like a superstar, which I always thought that he had main event credentials. I just never thought they were met. Overall, I would say that the show was not all that good. And maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that I've been watching NXT, NWA, and AEW every week for the last month, and you know, those shows have been far and away superior to anything Impact's produced in a long time. If you have not seen the show yet and you are thinking about checking it out, I would say that you should watch the three-way match for the tag titles. Watch the Elgin Marufuji match with the mentality that it is an empty arena match. And if you like hardcore garbage-style wrestling matches, you might enjoy the main event. Other than that, I would not recommend anything else on this program. And with that out of the way, let's move on to NWA Power, Episode 3. The show opens with Eddie Kingston interrupting Jim Cornette and Joe Galli at the commentary booth. Talks about the Dawsons interfering in their title match last week. Says it doesn't sit well with him and Homicide. Talks about NWA management being smart enough to give him and Homicide another title shot down the road. And with that all said, Eddie says that he has nothing else to live for in this world but wrestling, and he wants the Dawsons in the parking lot for a fight. And it was at this point that I wrote down, Eddie Kingston knows how to be Brian Pillman better than Brian Pillman Jr. knows how to be Brian Pillman. How sad. Marty Bell versus Crystal Rose. Crystal Rose, you say? Boy, is that a glow name if I ever heard one. Also, I noted here, Crystal Rose is wearing ripped mesh leggings that only run through the back of her legs. Why even bother? Anyway, the match was really not all that good. There were no notable botches or anything, but Marty's still very green, and you could clearly tell that during this match. She won with a pedigree. Really nothing much else to say about it. Cornette was spending most of the match talking about the Dawsons, answering Eddie's challenge from the previous segment, so you could tell how engaged he was during this match. Speaking of them, we had the Dawsons come out for an interview with David Marquez. They kind of talked in circles for a couple minutes, something about guys throwing their weight around to get in the spotlight, and now it's time for the Dawsons to throw their weight around, to which I responded with, "That's a lot of weight." And then they concluded by saying that they will fight any guy in the back except for Eddie and Homicide. So I guess Eddie and Homicide count as one person now. They had a hype promo for Thunder Rosa. The extent to which my notes read are as follows. If you are prone to chronic seizures, do not watch this video. Then we had the greatest segment of 2019. So Joe Galli was going to interview Tim Storm, but instead, Aron Stevens comes out dressed in a pirate outfit. He informs Joe to remind the people to not make eye contact with him. Joe asks about Aron getting a tag partner to team up to take on the Dawsons later on, but Aron says that he is out to promote his new film entitled Tropical Pirates. A film in which he informs us is available in Blu-ray, DVD, and, this is a direct quote here, in Romania exclusively, VHS. I presume the Romanians are not caught up with modern technology. He then plays a promo of his new film for everyone, which consists of many camera angles of boats riding on water, a one-liner of dialogue, and a message that the film will come out in the summer of 2020. To which I responded by writing down, if this film is not out on Blu-ray, DVD, or exclusive Romanian VHS by the summer of 2020, I will be incredibly sad. And then Aron concludes with a wrestling reference, and I quote, "When it comes to acting, I have more chops than Ric Flair." And after this, I immediately coined this the greatest moment of 2019 in wrestling. As awesome as the Tyler Bate-Walter match was from the UK show over the summer, I still hold that this was the best thing I have seen in wrestling all year. And ironically enough, it did not include a single thing regarding professional wrestling, with the exception of one insider troll to the fans. And, by the way, people, I don't think I need to remind you of this, but Aron Stevens is absolutely great. Following this, they display a message that reads, "Up next, Tim Storm," with a parentheses note, "We promise." I laughed. Anyway, we did not, in fact, get Tim Storm up next, which was the second instance of false advertising on their part. Instead, we got Caleb Conley versus Dan Parker. Dan Parker has the Zack Sabre Jr. physique, where he has a complete six-pack despite having no muscle definition on his arms or legs. It's basically just a straight stick from head to toe. Anyway, they had a fun little match here. Caleb's a good athlete, so he controlled a lot of the offense early on. They had a very brief heat sequence where Parker tried to use the ropes for leverage during an abdominal stretch. Caleb hip-tossed Parker across the ring, ran wild for a minute, and then ended up getting the win with a moonsault. And then finally, after 2 instances of false advertising, we get Tim Storm out for his designated interview. Joe basically asked him to reflect on his loss to Nick Aldis. Tim talked about the 10 Pounds of Gold series, which changed his perception of him as a performer. Says that he is still Mama Storm's boy. And as he's teasing the idea of throwing in the towel, Eli Drake comes out and basically gives him a pep talk. Says that even if the 10 Pounds of Gold is not in Tim's future, the tag titles could be. And he tells Tim that he wants him to be his partner to take on the Dawsons later on in the night. And then Tim Storm said that he would think about it. And the fans booed. It was a good skit. They did a good job teasing the retirement deal, which is kind of what they were alluding to in the title of the show. So it was a good swerve without being over the top and ridiculous. I still think they're going against the grain by trying to make Eli Drake a babyface, but I mean, whatever. He can still cut a promo better than 98% of the guys in the business today, so good on him. We had a very awkward comedy commercial for a product called Invisible Hair Cream. Dan Folks Waffles and Tire Irons, this was not. And that's my very polite way of saying this was no good. We had Josephus come out for a public apology, and instead we got Colt Cabana coming out. Josephus hands him a cowboy hat and a beer bottle. He shakes his hand, he throws white powder into Colt's eyes, and as he tosses him into the ring, James Storm sneaks in from behind and gives him a last call shot. And then he teases he's going to do the same to Colt, but Ken Anderson pulls him out, and that was that. I really didn't dig this skit. It's mostly due to the fact that I had absolutely no idea what they were going for here. At first, I thought they were doing a deal where Colt was going to cosplay as James Storm for them to get some cheap heat, but then Josephus throws powder into Colt's eyes, making Colt look like a dumb babyface, and then Storm comes out and teases he's going to kick Colt in the face, and yeah, this just didn't work for me. Way too convoluted and way too much blurring of character continuity here. And this was something that I noted was a problem with the show last week, particularly during the James Storm-Eli Drake confrontation. I said that I didn't like how quickly they were diving into making Storm look more heelish without really building up to it. And I got those same vibes during the skit with Colt Cabana. You know, last week he's out there trying to get himself over as a babyface, the crowd's going crazy for him. And then this week he's just out there being a pawn for a Josephus heel plot, and it just made him look like a complete idiot by the end. So, I just didn't really like this at all. Nick Aldis comes out for an interview with Joe Galli. Joe asks Nick who he believes is next in line to challenge him for the NWA World Heavyweight title. Aldis says that there's a lot of talent in the back who can step up, including guys like Eli Drake and James Storm. He even puts over Ricky Starks as his number 1 draft pick. Says that he has other options to go to other organizations to find an opponent if no one in NWA is willing to step up. Joe tries to revisit the Camille issue as being Aldis' insurance policy. Tries to ask her again why she's doing this, but Camille says nothing. And then Aldis explains that she will speak when she feels like speaking. Eli Drake and Tim Storm versus the Dawsons in the main event. If you actually look at this match in a bubble, you've got the absolute perfect set of 4 guys for a tag match. You got the 2 big bully heels, you got the less agile babyface to get heat on, and then you've got the athletic young babyface to make the big fiery comeback at the end. And that was pretty much the story they told. Drake and Storm controlled a lot of the offense early on, making constant tags in and out to one another. They had a very short little heat sequence where the Dawsons isolated Storm in a bear hug. And I also like the little attention to detail here, where Storm hit one of the Dawson brothers with the boot off the ropes the first time, but then the second time he tried it, the Dawson had it scouted and used it to take advantage. Again, professional wrestling does not have to be difficult, folks. You do not need to perform 2,500 moves in a 5-minute match for it to be good and make sense. Simple things like this can still get over in 2019. So Drake eventually got a hot tag at the end. Storm tried to Irish whip Drake into the Dawson brother in the corner, but he sidestepped it and Drake ran shoulder first into the post. The Dawsons took advantage on Storm, hit the face plant pile driver thing for the pin, and after the match, the Dawsons continued to beat on Tim until Homicide and Eddie Kingston ran down and took off after them to the back. And then Nick Aldis came down to check on Tim with Eli Drake before the show went off the air. A little bit of an abrupt, bizarre ending to the show, but I think it still worked. Overall, I would give the show a solid thumbs up. I did not like the segment with Colt Cabana, James Storm, Ken Anderson, and Josephus. And again, it's not that anything they did was miserably bad or anything. I guess looking back at it, I didn't really get the idea behind the whole segment or what they were going for. But aside from that, nothing else really stood out as being notably bad or wretchedly embarrassing. And while I know the match quality is never going to be anything on the level of AEW or NXT, at least I am seeing a different presentation of pro wrestling in 2019 that still makes rational sense. Storyline progression is logical most of the time. Characters are constantly being developed. The wrestlers are actually trying to work a semblance of a pro wrestling match, work the crowd without having to drastically abuse their bodies. I actually buy into everything that I am watching for a change. Yeah, so far this is my favorite show of the three I'm watching. And the only thing holding the company back right now is not having a television deal to work with. But I don't think that's really something they need to worry about right now. Right now, the studio show works for them in the short term, and it's perfectly fine. The audience is engaged from top to bottom. They're cheering and booing the right people. And most importantly, they're not going into business for themselves by chanting a bunch of nonsensical crap just to amuse themselves. Take note, WWE fans. So overall, good show. Moving on here, AEW Dynamite from October 23rd, 2019. Private Party versus the Lucha Brothers in a semifinal match for the AEW tag titles. So they took a different approach to the beginning of the show this week. Instead of having the opening promo and graphics to welcome everyone to the program, they just start the show with Private Party and Phoenix and Pentagon already in the ring, ready to compete. And I guess the most gallant way that I can sum this up without making it sound like I'm completely burying it, if I was watching the gymnastics team perform at the Olympics, this probably would have been the greatest television experience of my life. Unfortunately, the reality soon hit me that I was supposed to be watching a professional wrestling match on a professional wrestling show. And to me, that was the biggest problem with this. There was absolutely no effort on anyone's behalf to work any semblance of a tag match here. Everything was big move, transition, lather, rinse, repeat. And, I don't want to try and downgrade anything that they did. Phoenix and Pentagon are absolutely remarkable athletes. Private Party is a young, hot duo that have a great future. They will always kind of feel like a watered-down version of the Street Profits to me, but, that's kind of how it goes, I guess. And like I said, they did a lot of impressive stuff here. And I know a lot of people loved this match and thought it was fantastic. And the only thing that I can say to that is, if this is your style of pro wrestling that you love watching, that is great. I'm okay with spot fest matches from time to time, but to give you my honest opinion, I don't think that this is the right match to do it with. There were a lot of times during this alleged tag match where guys were just going in and out without tags, or guys would get tags and continue to stay in the ring to do moves while the ref just let it happen. I mean, even JR was essentially calling out how ridiculous the whole thing was. He's like, right now I'm seeing a lot of one-off moves, but no semblance of an actual tag match. And he was exactly right. If you are going to have tag matches on your program, then have frickin' tag matches. Don't sit there and just have guys randomly waltz in and out of the ring to hit a bunch of flashy garbage. If you're going to do crap like that, you may as well just book a bunch of tornado matches. At least that way I wouldn't have to keep wondering why the ref's not bothering to take ownership and get the wrestlers to follow the rules of tag matches. I mean, even JR said on commentary, I forget if it was this match or the Dark Order SoCal match, but he says, and this is almost directly from his mouth here, in AEW, guys have about 10 seconds to get out of the ring once they tag out. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, well, when the hell was that ever enforced? Because I sure haven't seen it yet. I just watched a tag match where dudes were working double team moves for like 30 to 60 second time spans before they ever left the ring. And the ref's just letting it happen. Like, come on guys. This is WCW level stupidity right here. Either you have rules for matches or you don't. You gotta get this crap straightened out now if you want us to take your product seriously. Anyway, Pentagon won with the package pile driver on the blonde highlighted private party dude after Phoenix hit a suicide dive to the non-highlighted private party member. And like I said, they did a lot of impressive stuff here. But yeah, I just couldn't get past the whole tag team rule breaking thing. If you were going to do a match like this, it should have been some kind of tornado rules / no DQ stipulation. At least that way the ref could have dispatched of tag rolls and just let the dudes do stuff. And, you know, above all else, it's particularly unfortunate when you realize that AEW has arguably the best tag division out of any major organization in the world right now. And when I see matches like this where basic and fundamental rules of tag matches are being broken just for the sake of doing a bunch of cool stuff, it just makes me that much more frustrated. Fun match, just not my flavor. They shot a hype promo for this guy named Wardlow, which essentially was just this big muscular guy lifting weights and training. So he's basically AEW's version of Brian Cage. It's literally all I got from this promo package. Kazarian and Scorpio Sky versus the Dark Order in a semifinal tag team tournament match. I will at least say that this match tried to follow some semblance of tag team rules. You know, these guys were tagging in and out throughout. I will also credit them for at least trying to provide some backstory for the Dark Order. They aired that video package before the match, which essentially was just a highlight reel of the Dark Order beating up people, so it really didn't do a whole lot. But they did have Excalibur try to bring up how Grayson and Uno used to wrestle under a different moniker, but then they disappeared from the indie circuit for a while, only to come back with this weird cult-like gimmick. So at least I can give them props for trying to put over this team that clearly nobody cares about. The match was pretty good for the most part. Very basic match. The heels beat on Scorpio for a while until Kaz got a hot tag. There was a completely preposterous spot right before the commercial where Kazarian ended up getting restrained by the female referee Aubrey Edwards. That was very unbelievable. They shot an angle in the middle of the match where the Inner Circle members showed up in the crowd and went up into the skybox area. And there was about a 2-minute stretch where not a single fan was paying attention to the match, but turned their attention up to the Inner Circle guys. That was a risky move. At least it was done during the heat, though. But the fans got back into the match. Babyfaces made a comeback. A couple big near falls, and then Kaz and Scorpio ended up getting the win. At least they changed their finisher this time. Joey Janela versus Kenny Omega. Before I get into this match, I guess I should preface this by saying I heard a lot of people raving about the Janela Omega match from the AEW Dark program last week. I have not seen the match, nor do I plan on seeing it. I have seen plenty of Joey Janela hardcore / unsanctioned matches. They're fine for what they are, but they're not my cup of tea, and I really don't feel the need to comment any further on them. With that said, and no, I do not mean this compliment facetiously, this was the best Joey Janela match I think I've ever seen. Him and Omega worked a very competent match. They went back and forth, lots of near falls and good offense from both guys. Crowd got into it. There was a comment that JR made during this match regarding Janela, and him saying that Janela might be the future of AEW. I can only hope that he's not being serious when he says that. There was one stupid spot in the match, and it was the part where Janela missed a flipping senton off the top rope onto the ring apron. And I said this last week when Adam Page did the same thing. It's a stupid spot. It's completely unnecessary, and I wish guys would stop doing it. But, Janela's a boneheaded goofball, so of course he was bound to do something stupid in this match. At least I can say that it played into the finish, so, it wasn't just a dumb spot for the sake of doing a dumb spot. Omega ended up falling with the V-trigger and the one-winged angel for the 3 count. Like I said, good match and good spotlight for Janela. Up next, we had a Cody interview with Tony Schiavone. But before Cody could really say anything, the Inner Circle guys shot off air horns in the skybox area, which completely drowned out the promo. Jericho started talking trash to Cody. Cody tells Jericho that this is not the other wrestling company, so he could easily head through the crowd and beat the crap out of Jericho right now if he wanted to. Jericho mocks Cody, says it's 4-on-1 and he'd be stupid to pick a fight at a disadvantage. This eventually brought out a bunch of babyfaces to stand alongside Cody, including Dustin Rhodes, MJF, and, of all people, Diamond Dallas Page, which got the biggest pop out of everyone here. And yes, everyone, just so that you are not mistaken, biggest pop of the entire segment going to Diamond Dallas Page in 2019. Go figure. So, and we also had a great line here during MJF's entrance where Jericho starts to taunt him for wearing a scarf. He's like, who gets intimidated by a guy wearing a scarf? Everyone, of course, laughs at this. They ended up going after the Inner Circle guys into the skybox area. All the heels retreated despite having a fair 4-on-4 opportunity to fight, which I did not discount. Cody grabbed MJF's scarf and punched a hole through the gimmicked glass a la Goldberg in WCW in 1999. Thankfully, they were actually smart here to make the glass actually gimmicked, as opposed to risking having Cody punch through legitimate glass. They had this great brawl in the lobby area. Cody rammed Jericho's face into the Dippin' Dots concession, which really sent JR off the deep end. He's like, not the Dippin' Dots, he says. I laughed. They ended up having security do a pull apart, and they're trying to hold back fans. They're all cheering like wild animals for this. And in the greatest moment of the entire segment, right before the cameras cut away, they film Jericho, who is literally on the ground, weeping and saying, I bought a ticket, damn it. Overall, I really enjoyed this segment here. Easily my favorite thing on the show, and I thought it did a great job building up hype for the Cody Jericho title match at the November pay-per-view. Everyone was on point here. Cody was awesome. Jericho was phenomenal. Everyone played their part well. Just a really well put together segment. Best Friends versus the Young Bucks. They did a shtick with Orange Cassidy before the match where he gave the lethargic shin kicks to the Bucks. And then after the Bucks gave him the super kick, the crowd booed, which was evident to happen. There was yet another point during the match where JR and Schiavone called out the garbage where guys were refusing to use the tag ropes. Again, because even JR and Tony understand how ridiculous this whole tag deal is with AEW matches. The match was fine for what it was. Nothing really notable happened outside of some heat angles with Orange Cassidy. They tried to tell some kind of side story with the Bucks kicking out of Chucky's Falcon Arrow. I mean, even Excalibur's like, nobody's ever kicked out of the Falcon Arrow. And then they never really followed up on it, so it was weird. Chucky and Trent are just sort of a team that exists right now, which isn't a bad thing, really. I mean, the match was just sort of a way to put the Bucks over before they face LAX at the pay-per-view. Not really bad or anything, I wondered why they didn't involve LAX in any way, shape, or form here. Jamie Hayter versus Britt Baker. So, just so I can set the record straight, let me try and lay this out. So, the week before Britt gets to perform in her hometown of Pittsburgh, they book a Riho Britt Baker women's title match in Philly, just so that when they do get to Pittsburgh, they can have Britt work a generic enhancement match. presumably because they didn't want to beat Britt in her hometown, or because they didn't want to risk Riho getting booed because they're trying to push her as a babyface. Sounds to me like they shouldn't have done the match to begin with. Anyway, this match quickly became a reality check for a lot of people, wherein the supposed enhancement talent was actually a much better wrestler and worker than the talent they were trying to put over in this match, and it definitely showed throughout. The match wasn't bad or anything. The crowd was definitely behind Britt throughout. She took a beating for a while, made a big comeback, got a super kick, followed by the lockjaw for the submission win. And I'm not going to say that Britt isn't someone they should focus on, because she's definitely got something. She's stunningly gorgeous. She's got a strong upside as a talent. She conducts herself professionally. And she's definitely got a passionate fan base behind her, even though they were in Pittsburgh. The problem, though, is that she's still very green. And with the talent pool that AEW has right now in their women's division, I think they're making a huge mistake trying to force Britt to work matches on national TV when she's clearly not ready. With all the female talent they have signed right now, including the women from over in Japan that have a lot of ring experience, I feel that they would be better served trying to build up title contenders for Riho that are comfortable performing on camera, as opposed to trying to, rush into getting Britt to wrestle on TV every week. I like the video promo they played before the match. I thought it did a good job familiarizing people with who Britt Baker is. I wish they would do more stuff like this with Britt for the time being, instead of exposing her rawness as a wrestler every week. Let her conduct promos. Let her do a couple interviews. Don't be in such a hurry to have her wrestle every week. I think she'll get better over time, but for right now, Britt being booked to wrestle every week is really exposing her. And the other problem, too, it's just like I was saying before, the talent pool in the women's division for AEW is pretty big right now. They got a jacked roster full of girls that they're just not using. And it makes me wonder why they're so insistent on signing all of them if they're not going to use them. It's just weird to me. Anyway, after this, we had a brief skit backstage where interviewer Jen Decker tried to talk with Jamie Hayter. And before Jamie could say anything, Brandy Rhodes ran in, blindsided Jamie from behind, and then what I can only best describe as awkwardly and overdramatically raising her fist to Jen when she tried to pull her back. Yeah, I have no idea either. Jon Moxley versus Pac. So before bell time, they had a little under 15 minutes left in the show by this point. And as soon as Justin Roberts announced that the 5-minute warning was coming, everybody in the building knew the match was going to end in a draw. And I don't want to say that it killed the crowd, but you could definitely hear an audible and collective groan when they all heard that the time limit deal was brought up. Still, though, I think Pac and Moxley worked a very good main event match here. Pac jumped Moxley on the ramp with a chair and beat on him for a while. Moxley hit one of those old modified versions of the Dirty Deeds on the ring apron to Pac. They had a cool stiff exchange before the comeback. Moxley fired back with some dives. They kept kicking out of stuff while the clock ran down. Pac did a great 450 splash on the outside. He missed a black arrow on Moxley in the ring. And then Moxley eventually hit the Dirty Deeds, or not the Dirty Deeds. What the hell's that move called now? Rough Rider, that's it. He hits the Rough Rider, and he doesn't capitalize. Pac kicks out, and then the time expires. Then after the bell, Moxley takes out the ref and curses out the camera to end the show. And it was a bit of a flat finish to end the show, but I didn't mind the time limit draw. Apparently they shot an angle or something after the show with Pac and Moxley to set up a match for them at the Full Gear pay-per-view, which should be a lot of fun. I don't know if they'll add like a gimmick or something to it, but they had a good match here, so I would expect that given more time, they could really pull something together great at the pay-per-view. And, that was AEW Dynamite for Week 4. Like I said, I really enjoyed the Inner Circle Cody angle. Easily the best part of the show for me. Main event was a lot of fun, and as I said before, I was okay with the time limit draw. The whole tag team situation is a completely different issue here, though, and it is a major issue for AEW. For a company that's priding itself on developing a legitimate tag division, the basic rule breaking of fundamental tag matches bothers me even more. I still maintain that if you are going to allow guys to work without getting tags or, bend the rules with guys going in and out during these matches, you either need to enforce the fundamental rules of tag matches, or you need to announce that tag matches in AEW are Tornado Lucha style rules where tags don't matter, and as long as two guys are in the ring at a given time, it's fine. One or the other. But right now, your play-by-play commentator is pointing out the obvious flaws of how your tag matches are being constructed, and it's a huge issue. And aside from that, I don't really have anything major to complain about. The wrestling's always very good, and the crowds are always hot. The big buildings that actually show the crowd reacting makes everything that much better. So as far as production in wrestling goes, AEW is doing very well right now. I still would like to see a little more video promo action and some interviews for the lesser established talent, but right now their main focus should be on enforcing the rules of tag matches, because it's really dragging the show down right now. And considering that the majority of matches on AEW television have been tag matches, it continues to bother me even more. All right, NXT from October 23rd, 2019. Rhea Ripley versus Bianca Belair. This ended up being a very good match by the end. It took a while to get going, though. They did a test of strength sequence early on. Bianca ended up controlling a good chunk of the action for a while. There was an incredibly dangerous-looking bump where Bianca gave Rhea a military press off the top rope, and Rhea was like inches away from landing wrong on the back of her neck. They went through a commercial break. Rhea made a big comeback, tried for the reverse cloverleaf deal that she beat Aaliyah with last week, but Bianca rolled out of the ring. Rhea hit a leaping senton off the apron. After she tossed Bianca back into the ring, Io Shirai ran in and hit the 619 behind the ref's back. Bianca got a spear for a near fall. Crowd's going nuts for all of this. Finally, Io gets on the apron to argue with the call, but Candice LeRae runs down and yanks Io off the apron. And then Rhea hits a pump handle slam on Bianca and gets the pin. Like I said, the match ended up really picking up after the commercial. I like the story progression they're building up right now with Rhea and Io. My presumption is that Io beats Candice next week. They set up a number one contenders match with Rhea versus Io at some point. And then they set up Rhea versus Shayna for the women's title at War Games. All in all, good segment. We had a rather subdued interview with Kathy Kelly, Pete Dunne, and Tyler Bate in the parking lot. In fact, allow for me to present my interpretation of this Pete Dunne interview. Kathy says, "What is your response to Damian Priest's actions during your match last week?" Pete's monotone response, "Priest did what he had to do. No excuses." Kathy's follow-up, "Well, what about Killian Dane?" And the riveting yet unintentionally comical response from Pete Dunne, "I don't care about Killian Dane." To which I responded with a clear-cut statement, "Neither does anyone else watching this program." Matt Riddle versus Cameron Grimes. If you watched my FSWR report from Monday, I spent a decent amount of time talking about how one of the elements that has been missing from both AEW and NXT, particularly with a lot of the newbies they're trying to establish. I said that I need to see them do more than just matches with these new talents so that I can get a clearer vision of who these characters are, what their goals are, and why I should care about them going forward. And, well, long story short, they didn't really do that here. It was more of the same idea of just throw guys out there to work matches and hope for the best. So while I'm still not going to give creative a pass on this, moreover because this is still a grave issue for both products right now, I will at least say that this was one hell of a match between Riddle and Grimes. It was very PWG-esque, if I were to give it some kind of comparison. They had a very fun, competitive back-and-forth match. Riddle controlled a lot of the action. There was a Goldberg-like Riddle chant early on, to which Riddle responded by giving Grimes a jackhammer for a near fall. Crowd really liked that. They actually did bring up on commentary, too, the fact that Riddle's had a knack for trolling a lot of talent on social media, including Goldberg. We also had a great commentary moment in this match where Morrow unintentionally referred to Beth as Bill. And Morrow's best comeback line is basically just saying, "I'll pick up the tab next time for you, Beth." Anyway, Riddle ended up countering the running stomp into a powerbomb, followed by a knee strike and a bro Derek on Grimes for the 3. Really good match, like I said. And then afterwards, Riddle went to give Grimes a fist bump after the bell, but Grimes blew him off. And after he gave Tyler Bate a fist bump, Grimes shoved Tyler. He went up to get his top hat, and then Bate gave him a left-handed punch to knock him out. And all of this was designed to set up Bate versus Grimes for next week's program. And while I know for a fact that it will not be as good as Tyler Bate's match with Walter from the NXT UK TakeOver show in Cardiff, still looking forward to it. And, let me just say this real quick before I move on. I know I've been kind of down on Grimes over the last few weeks. I've had a lot of criticisms, shall we say, when it comes to Grimes' matches. Aside from the fact that I don't really get the gimmick, and I think he'd be best served changing up his looks so that he doesn't look like generic indie guy 372, he is a very talented athlete. My issues with Grimes have never been his wrestling ability. My issues with him is that he's basically wrestling as Trevor Lee, but now he has a top hat and a southern gimmick. And for his sake, I think a gear change and a haircut would do him wonders in the future. Also, shaving his chest would be a positive too. Just saying. We then had what I can only best describe as the most WWE-style promo from Dominik Dijakovic. He's basically just sitting and looking off the camera to his right, clearly reading off a teleprompter of some sort, although his delivery was easily more authentic than either Keith Lee or Roderick Strong's promo in this style later on. Talked about his bloodline and being sidetracked with an injury that prevented him from pursuing championship gold. And tonight he's going to fulfill his promise when he becomes the North American champion. Very scripted is what I concluded with here. And unfortunately, this was not the only version of this promo that they aired on this show. Breezango and Isaiah Swerve Scott versus the Forgotten Sons. Breeze and Fandango were sporting the wife beaters attire, along with their pilot gear for this episode. We had an incredibly wincing line from Beth during the intros, and I cannot do it justice by trying to reenact it like the Pete Dunne interview, so I'm going to read this as it was stated live. Apparently, after Beth had asked Breezango to teach her how to fly a plane, she was told, and I quote here, "The key to a smooth ride is to have a good grip on the throttle, and if the throttle is too big, they said I should use 2 of them." And this was merely met in complete astonishment by the announcers, to the point where Nigel's only response is to inform Beth that she should be a limbo dancer because everything goes over her head. And this is not statistically inaccurate. And with that wacky line out of the way, I am happy to inform everyone that I really enjoyed the 6-man, up until about the last 60 seconds. The faces ran wild early on, heat on Breeze for a while. We did have another flinching line from Beth here where she informed us that Jackson Riker likes to refer to his offense as, and I quote here, "a vulgar display of savagery." I could just see a WWE-style promo coming from him sooner rather than later, wherein he uses that exact terminology, while looking off camera into a teleprompter, by the way. And when that day comes, it will be equally as painful to listen to. Anyway, hot tag to Fandango. He got a bit of offense before tagging in Scott. The heels ended up cutting him off and hitting a cool-looking Hurricane Rana / double headbutt trio sequence for a near fall. Scott made a big comeback on all 3 heels by himself. He hit this amazing moonsault press by using Riker's chest as a launching pad. It looked absolutely impeccable, and crowd went ballistic for it. Breeze and Fandango got the super kick on Riker, and had that been the finish to this match while the crowd was still hot, it would have been perfect. Unfortunately, Cutler and Blake broke up the fall, and the crowd died off completely. They did a few more things, and then finally Scott pinned one of the brown-haired members with a kick thing. If they would have shaved off the last minute here, it would have been perfect. Unfortunately, they tried to go longer, crowd didn't stay invested, and the finish ended up falling a little flat. Then we had Roddy's horribly contrived and wooden promo, where he as well looked off camera into a teleprompter, clearly reading lines verbatim. I have no idea what he said. Something about Regal trying to screw him out of his title by putting him in the ring with two guys twice his size. And then we had an absolutely random cruiserweight match featuring, and no, I am not making this up here, Angel Garza versus Jack Gallagher. They had Lio Rush out there to do commentary. It was every bit as awful as you could possibly imagine. I actually wrote down here, I cannot believe that they actually had this man as a mouthpiece for Bobby Lashley on the main roster at one point, particularly because if you actually watched Lashley's promo work in TNA before he left, he actually wasn't a bad promo. Like, he ended up being pretty decent by the end of his run there. And for some reason, they tried to stick a heater with him in the form of Lio Rush, and it absolutely tanked on the main roster. So here he is out there doing very awkward verbiage for this match. And no, it was not Scott Steiner awkward. It was horribly off-the-cuff WWE commentary that made the segment worse by comparison. Gallagher and Garza did a bunch of stuff that I didn't even bother writing down. And then Garza won with a springboard moonsault. It was there. Dakota Kai and Tegan Nox versus Marina Shafir and Jessamine Duke. The winners get a tag title match against the Kabuki Warriors next week. Once again, we have a cringy Beth Phoenix line. I feel like I need to come up with a term for that. Maybe call it like a Bethism or something like that. Anyway, there's a point in this match where she informs us that Marina likes to refer to herself as, and no, again, I am not making this up, by the way. This is an exact quote. She says that Marina likes to refer to herself as the CEO of the judo throw, which, looking back in context, might be more cringeworthy than hearing that Riker likes to refer to his offense as a vulgar display of savagery. Anyway, the match was really not all that good, if I'm being honest. Jessamine and Marina, I don't know. I don't want to just sit here and conclude that they're completely useless and you may as well just release them now, because that would imply that they're completely worthless as talents, and I actually don't think that. They play the role of being Shayna's punching bags very well. Man, when it comes to wrestling, it's literally the definition of a bull in a china shop watching these girls work. Jessamine looks a lot more comfortable than Marina in there, but between the both of them, they're still very clunky. Their offense is very sloppy. They have a very WWE-like approach to everything they do, up to and including the way they lock up and hit the ropes. And, for as long as they've been around, I never feel like there's any growth with them as wrestlers. So, I don't know. I mean, if you gotta have them wrestle from time to time, so be it. But, at some point, they're gonna have to improve in the ring. And with what we're at right now with this war for viewership between NXT and AEW every week, having your greener talents out there on national television might not be the best counter-programming. You see Britt Baker on AEW every week. Anyway, it was very short, and the heels worked over Dakota for a while. Tegan ended up getting a hot tag and made a short comeback, and then won with the Shiniest Wizard, which is still an absolutely putrid name for a finisher, and I wish they would change it. And then after the match, Asuka and Kairi Sane show up on the monitor. They ranted in Japanese for a minute, and then they concluded that Dakota and Tegan have no chance next week. I actually have a funny story regarding the Kabuki Warriors, now that I've had a chance to hear what a lot of people had to say about their duo on the main roster. Apparently, I am not the only one that was oddly confused by that Hell in a Cell pay-per-view tag match where the Kabuki Warriors were inexplicably heels for no reason. Apparently, they just turned heel off-screen despite anyone's knowledge of it. Everyone was confused by this, no one had an explanation, and no one in the company bothered to give an explanation. They just had Asuka and Kairi turn heel off camera for a pay-per-view tag match because I guess they figured people would hate it. WWE trolling at its finest. And it actually sucks because Kairi is going to be back on NXT for the first time since, April, I think. And Asuka is going to be back for the first time since God even knows how long. And when did she get called up to the main roster? Was it 2017, 2018? It's been well over a year. And we know that both of them are going to get megastar babyface treatments when they show up next week. So, I have no idea what's going on. I mean, it should be a fun tag match, but I have no idea how they are going to try and cover up for the evident ovation that Asuka and Kairi are going to get, despite them trying to be booked as the heels. Following this, in the worst of the 3 overly scripted promos hyping up the main event, Keith Lee got to say some stuff. And in fact, his promo was so ungodly wretched in its delivery, I am actually convinced that Keith went out of his way to sabotage this skit to make WWE look even more ridiculous, particularly because I have seen Keith Lee cut promos before. He always sounds pretty genuine and very calm, cool, and collected in his verbiage. This time, he was not only blatantly reading dialogue off a monitor off screen, but he was making it so obvious. I was very convinced that he did this on purpose to expose the company for this stupid method of scripting out promos. I mean, think about that for a sec. Out of all 3 guys that cut promos, Dominik Dijakovic, Keith Lee, and Roderick Strong, Keith Lee's was the worst promo, behind Roderick Strong, who I never thought was a good promo to begin with. Now that is saying something. And in our main event, Keith Lee versus Dominik Dijakovic versus Roderick Strong for the North American Championship. So, if you actually look at this match in its initial stages, it had a very simple story laid out. Keith and Dominik are the 2 big monster babyface challengers. Roddy's the small twerp with the title, and a lot of the match was basically designed so that Keith and Dominik could just throw around Roddy for a while, do the bulk of the work for the match, and then have Roddy end up stealing the pin in the end. That's what I thought was going to be the story. Instead, they did 50% of that story, and then the other 50% was all 3 guys doing a bunch of really cool off-the-wall stuff for the remainder of it. They had this fantastic moment midway through the match where Roddy's down on the mat, and Dominik gives Keith a vertical suplex on top of Roddy, to which Mauro responds by asking Beth, "What is the strategy in a 3-way? What must you do to survive?" And Beth's witty comeback is, well, most importantly, do not get squashed by Keith Lee. Duly noted, Beth. They did have one incredibly stupid spot that I never ever want to see tried again in a professional wrestling ring. They do this deal in the corner where they go for the Tower of Doom spot, and Roddy's going to take the superplex. But instead of just doing a normal Tower of Doom, they tried to have Dominik hold up Roddy in the air while Keith had Dominik in the powerbomb position. And I have no idea whose fault this was, whether Keith's legs gave out from under him or if Dominik lost the grip on Roddy. All I know is that Roddy nearly came crashing down on his neck and died. I never want to see anything like this attempted again, and shame on every single agent in the back that either okayed this or had any say in allowing this to air. I mean, this Wednesday Night War is not worth seeing people get severely crippled or die on national television doing stupid stunts. Don't ever let this happen again. We did have a great spot here on the outside where Keith and Dominik gave Roddy a feast your eyes / pounce combo, and then immediately went into a stare down where they challenged each other in the ring. It was at this point that I wrote down, I now officially want to see a Keith Lee Dominik Dijakovic tag team program. And no, I'm not joking about that either. So Dominik hit a dive over the top rope onto Roddy, immediately followed by Keith hitting a flipping senton, to which everyone in the building leapt to their feet with excitement. They had a very well-timed finish here, where Keith gives Dominik a super powerbomb off the top rope, and Roddy immediately runs in and hits the Shining Wizard for the 3. So, pretty stereotypical WWE finish in the 3-way where the heel steals the win from basically out of nowhere. I will say, though, it was a great-looking spot to close out the match. I absolutely loved, 99% of this. I absolutely hated that really stupid and vain modified Tower of Doom spot that nearly crippled Roderick for the rest of his life, possibly could have even killed him. I think that Keith and Dominik should be a tag team going forward, and I think that they should chase Kyle and Bobby for the tag titles because that would be a fantastic program. And this is easily my favorite match of the week, bar none. Still debating on whether I would put this on my list for top matches of 2019. It was a phenomenal match, and it was easily the most I've seen the Full Sail crowd invested in a match, probably since the Adam Cole-Matt Riddle match a few weeks back. I don't think it was the best performance any of the 3 guys have had in NXT, but it was still an incredibly awesome match. Anyway, afterwards, the Undisputed Era all came out to celebrate. They jumped Keith after the bell. This brought out Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, and Finn Balor to confront the Undisputed Era in the ring. And then in a very strange swerve, and no, I do not mean Isaiah Scott in this case, I mean a legitimate pro wrestling swerve, Balor gives Gargano the Pele kick and turns heel. In the Undisputed Era jump Ciampa, Balor gives Gargano the drop kick into the barricade and takes out some plants in the front row. He gives Gargano this brutal DDT right on top of his head. Absolutely disgusting looking. And in another very odd yet enticing little story angle, all the Undisputed Era guys throw up the sign to Balor. But Balor just stares at them in the ring and then points the gun down at Gargano and leaves. He never acknowledges joining the Undisputed Era. The announcers didn't draw attention to it. They kept it very vague and mysterious, and it was all excellently done. And I know I kind of crapped on the skit they shot last week with Balor talking about going back to his past in order to find himself. But, looking back at it in context now, it makes sense a week later. He was not talking about going back to his NXT roots. He's going back to his heel run in the Bullet Club over in Japan where he made his name known to the world. And this is really well done, I thought. I have absolutely no complaints with anything they did. I mean, the only thing that's unfortunate about it is that nobody's going to understand the Bullet Club references except for the people that watch New Japan or even know about Balor's association with it, which, basically just boils down to the hardcores. But casual viewers are going to look at this and not really get the reference, which is okay, I guess, provided they explain everything in time. But it's a real insider story they're running with right now. And while I understand the motivations, and a lot of hardcore fans will understand the motivations, I don't think a lot of modern WWE or casual fans will. Overall, this is a very good show from top to bottom. Beth was not on her A game with commentary this week, and the Jessamine Marina versus Dakota Tegan match was less than stellar. At least it was short. But other than that, I really liked most of what they did this week. Minus the interviews with the 3 guys in the main event. It was an easy show to watch. The matches were well booked. The crowd was hot for most of the show, which is a big surprise considering it was the Full Sail crowd. I think they need to do a lot more with promos and character development, particularly with these new guys they're trying to get over. And I will continue to harp on this until I see it out of both programs. If I'm going to call it AEW for this, I need to return the favor with NXT because both of these shows continue to have this problem. Anyway, that was wrestling for the week of, I guess, is October 20th through the 26th. Overall, I thought NWA, AEW, and NXT had a lot of good stuff. I definitely enjoyed AEW a lot more than I did last week's show. Same with NWA. The Finn Balor heel turn had a lot of people talking, and if they really milked that storyline over the next several weeks, they could build up to something pretty cool for that War Games show. Let me know what you all thought. What shows did you like the most? Did you watch all 3 shows? What were your favorite moments, least favorite moments? Share anything you have down below. And with that, I will see you all on Monday for the next installment of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report.